There are moments in life when everything around us seems to fall apart. Goals that once felt clear and certain suddenly become confusing. What we once chased with passion loses its shine. And in those moments, we ask ourselves, am I living the life I truly want, or am I just following a script that isn't mine? These questions don't arise by chance. They are echoes of a deeper truth, a call that resonates within us, inviting us to look in the mirror and face the one person who truly matters on this journey: ourselves. Carl Jung, one of the greatest thinkers of the 20th century, believed that life truly begins at 40, not because the years before lack value, but because the first decades are like a training camp, a period of learning, building, and constructing our identity. But what if I told you that finding yourself has no age limit? What Jung called individuation, the process of becoming your true self, can begin at any stage of life, as long as you're willing to confront your masks and shadows. Finding yourself isn't a magical event or an immediate epiphany. It's a process, often starting with small discomforts. It might be the unease of a monotonous routine, the weariness of a strained relationship, or the feeling of living on autopilot. That discomfort, as unpleasant as it may be, is also a gift. It forces us to question the narrative we've adopted, to review the decisions we've made, and to realize that perhaps we're walking down a path we never truly chose. But how do we know if we're on the right path? And more importantly, how do we begin to map out a road that is truly ours? This is an invitation to reflect on these questions together. Let's explore what it means to create a life that you don't just live, but one that you feel. A life where every step brings you closer to who you really are. Imagine that each of us carries a mask. This isn't a mask meant to deceive or disguise, but a representation of the expectations the world has of us. Jung called this mask the persona, a social armor we develop from a young age to navigate life's complexities. It's how we present ourselves to the world, shaped by influences like family, culture, religion, and environment. In our early years, we're like sponges, absorbing beliefs, values, and behaviors that help us be accepted and valued by those around us. We're praised for acting in certain ways, encouraged to follow specific paths, and often pushed to ignore parts of ourselves that don't fit the mold. Over time, this persona grows stronger, becoming not just a tool for adaptation, but, for many, a prison. Jung believed this construction was necessary. Without the persona, it would be impossible to function in society. It gives us the tools to build careers, form relationships, and fulfill responsibilities. However, as time goes on, this mask can begin to suffocate us. We start to confuse the persona with our true essence, believing that we are only what we show to others, and that's when the cracks begin to appear. These cracks can surface during times of crisis. Maybe you're living someone else's dream, a career idealized by your parents, a relationship that seems perfect to your friends, or a lifestyle that follows society's standards. On the outside, everything seems to be in place, but inside, there's a feeling of emptiness. This happens because the persona, no matter how brilliant, cannot reflect the totality of who we are. As we age, the discomfort with this mask can intensify. The persona, once so effective, starts to limit our growth. We feel stuck in roles that no longer represent us. The successful professional who's exhausted, the loving partner who's lost the connection, or the friend who always says yes out of fear of rejection. The question that arises at this point is, who am I beyond this mask? This is the beginning of the search for authenticity. It's the moment when we realize that there are parts of ourselves we've left behind, hidden under the mask of the persona. To find ourselves, we need the courage to question this construction, to look beyond external expectations, and to explore what truly matters. Discovering who we are behind the persona isn't simple. It requires facing judgments, letting go of old beliefs, and often disappointing those who expect us to keep playing the roles we've always played. But it's also a liberating journey, because it's only when we start removing the layers of the persona that we can glimpse what truly defines us. Freeing ourselves from the persona is only the beginning. When we take off the mask, we realize there's so much more to us than we imagined, and not everything is comfortable to face. Jung called this uncharted territory the shadow. The shadow is the part of ourselves that we hide, repress, or pretend doesn't exist. It's the fears we avoid, the desires we're ashamed of, and even the qualities we underestimate. The shadow is everything we prefer to set aside, but it never truly disappears. Why are we so afraid of our shadow? Who hasn't heard phrases like, "Don't cry, be strong," or "That's not acceptable"? Little by little, we learn that certain emotions, anger, sadness, insecurity, are not welcome. So we tuck those parts of ourselves away in an emotional basement, believing that if we don't see them, they'll stop existing. But what we ignore doesn't disappear. It waits for the right moment to resurface. Confronting the shadow is uncomfortable because it forces us to face our contradictions. We can be generous, but also selfish, brave, but full of fear. We want to be loved, but fear rejection. These conflicting parts scare us because they challenge the idea of who we believe we are. But as Jung suggested, by accepting our shadow, we can become whole. Facing our shadow is an act of defeat. It's an act of courage. Imagine someone who finally admits they're afraid of failure. That person might discover that behind that fear lies a genuine desire to grow. Or someone who recognizes their envy might realize it reflects something they'd like to achieve. The shadow, as scary as it seems, is an opportunity for self-discovery. When we confront it, it stops being a hidden monster and becomes an integrated part of who we are. It's important to remember that this process isn't something we should do alone. Sharing our vulnerabilities with trusted people or seeking support from a therapist can make the journey easier. In the end, the shadow gains strength in isolation, but loses power when exposed to light. Accepting our hidden parts doesn't mean we're fixing something broken within us. On the contrary, it's a recognition that we are human, with light and darkness coexisting inside us. And by embracing those parts, we discover a freedom that goes beyond any external approval. The freedom to be who we really are, without masks or filters. Confronting our shadow is a crucial step on the path to self-knowledge. Jung called this process individuation, the journey toward wholeness. It's the integration of all parts of ourselves, light and shadow, reason and intuition, mask and essence. It's the moment we stop trying to be what the world expects us to be and start being who we really are. But what does it mean to awaken our true self? In simple terms, it's about leaving autopilot behind and starting to live with intention. It's about discovering what truly matters beyond the layers of expectations we've accumulated over the years. This process isn't linear, and it rarely happens overnight. In fact, individuation often begins with a crisis, a feeling that life has lost its brightness, that we're trapped in a repetitive cycle, or that our once important goals now seem empty. These crises can be terrifying, but they're also invitations to profound change. It's as if life is asking us to pause and ask ourselves, who am I, really? And more importantly, what do I truly want? The answers to these questions aren't found in success manuals or well-meaning advice from others. They're within us, waiting to be discovered. Individuation doesn't mean rejecting everything we've built so far. On the contrary, It's a process of reevaluation. It's about looking at our choices and realizing which were made out of fear or the need to please, and which truly reflect our deepest value. It's a journey to reconnect with our dreams and passions, often forgotten amid the pressures of daily life. As we become more aligned with who we are, we begin to feel a renewed sense of freedom. This isn't the freedom to do whatever we want without consequences, but the freedom to live authentically. Decisions that were once difficult, like changing careers, ending a relationship, or reevaluating friendships, begin to make more sense because they're guided by what truly nourishes us. On this path, we also discover that being authentic doesn't mean being perfect. It means embracing our imperfections as part of what makes us unique. When we allow ourselves to be vulnerable and whole, we realize that authenticity is what connects us deeply with others. It's not our mask of success or perfection that inspires. It's our courage to be real. This awakening of the true self is transformative, not because we become something we weren't before, but because we begin to live as who we've always been. It's a return to what's essential, genuine, and meaningful. Finding yourself and awakening your true self isn't the end of the journey. It's the beginning of a life that finally makes sense. When we integrate all parts of who we are and start living authentically, something remarkable happens. We find freedom. Not the freedom we imagined as young people, the kind that lets us do whatever we want, but the freedom to live with purpose, to align our actions with what we truly value. Living with purpose doesn't mean having all the answers or following a perfectly structured plan. In fact, it's the opposite. It's about accepting that life is dynamic, full of uncertainties, and that our role isn't to control it, but to make conscious decisions that reflect who we are. Think about the feeling of making a decision that comes from the heart, not from the expectations of others. Maybe it's saying no to an opportunity that doesn't resonate with you, or finally investing time in something you've always wanted to do but dismissed as impractical. Those moments of alignment are liberating because they remind us that life isn't about following a model. It's about creating our own path. This freedom, however, doesn't come without challenges. Often, living with purpose means letting go of ideas, people, or habits that no longer serve us. It's natural to feel fear in this process. Fear of failure, of disappointing others, or of feeling lost. But it's important to remember that the freedom to be ourselves doesn't imply an absence of difficulties. It's the ability to face them with courage, knowing that we're living our inner truth. When we live with purpose, our relationships also change. We begin to attract people who share similar values, who inspire and support us. We become more selective with our time and energy, prioritizing what brings us joy and meaning. And in doing so, we realize that living with purpose isn't just about grand transformations. It's also about the small daily decisions that reflect who we are. Another important aspect of this freedom is acceptance. Living with purpose doesn't mean we'll never have doubts or difficult days. On the contrary, it means accepting that life is imperfect but still deeply meaningful. When we adopt this perspective, we stop seeking happiness in external outcomes and start finding it in the simple act of being present, of being true to ourselves. That's the beauty of living with purpose. Every step, no matter how small, becomes a reflection of who we are. And when we look back, we realize that the decisions that seemed difficult led us to a life that's truly ours. Not because it was planned or idealized, but because it was lived with authenticity. When we free ourselves from external expectations and start living aligned with our purpose, we discover something transformative. Our life isn't just about us. It has the potential to impact others, to inspire, and to create a legacy. That legacy doesn't need to be grand or revolutionary. It can be found in the small marks we leave on the world and the people around us. Creating a personal legacy isn't about seeking recognition or fame. It's about living in a way that reflects our values and inspires authenticity. It's about the decisions we make, the connections we cultivate, and the meaning we bring to our actions. Often, the impact we leave on the world is invisible. It's in a piece of advice given with care, a gesture of generosity, or the cruel live that serves as an example to others. Think of someone who has deeply inspired. It might have been a mentor, a friend, or even an author whose words resonated with you. What made them special wasn't what they owned or achieved, but how they lived with integrity. Those people left a legacy because they were true to who they were, and that made them unforgettable. When we choose to live that way, we create a similar impact, often without even realizing it. That legacy is also reflected in how we face adversity. Life will never be completely free of challenges, but what matters is how we choose to respond to them. By facing our fears, accepting our shadows, and living with purpose, we show others that they can do the same. It's a way of telling the world, no matter how hard it gets, you can find strength within yourself. Creating a personal legacy also means accepting that it will continue even after we're gone. Our actions resonate through time, shaping the lives of those we touch. It might be something as simple as teaching a child a lesson in self-love, or sharing a story that inspires a friend. Those small seeds grow and flourish, creating an impact that transcends our existence. In the end, the true legacy isn't in the material things we accumulate. It's in how we live, in the memories we leave, the connections we create, and the authenticity we cultivate. And the most beautiful part is that by living an authentic and meaningful life, that legacy arises naturally as a reflection of who we are. As we conclude this journey, I hope you feel inspired to look within, to embrace every part of yourself, and to begin, or continue, living the life you desire. Because life doesn't begin when we achieve something external. It begins when we find ourselves. That's the true starting point, a beginning that not only transforms our existence, but leaves a mark on the world around us. Life begins when we find ourselves. That's the truth that resonates throughout this entire journey. It's not about a single moment or an endpoint, but a continuous process of discovery and acceptance. Along the way, we face our masks, embrace our shadows, awaken our true selves, and find the freedom to live with purpose. And in doing so, we realize that the world around us changes too, because our authenticity inspires others to find the same within themselves. Every step on this path is an invitation to look inward and ask, what truly makes me happy? What moves me? How can I live a life that's authentic to me? These questions, as simple as they may seem, have the power to transform everything. They lead us to live not for approval or out of fear, but with the courage to be whole. That's the beauty of a life that begins with self-discovery. It's not perfect, but it's real. And by living authentically, we not only free ourselves, but also create space for others to do the same. In the end, when we're honest with ourselves, the world responds with more truth.